Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Dr. Samuel Feinser, and today I have the honor of introducing you to two amazing groups of student researchers, activists, scholars. They have served as scholars and researchers and interviewers and interviewees, documenting struggles encountered by their respective communities and uplifting voices from their generations. First, you will hear from School in the Square alumni, a middle school in Washington Heights, who are in year 2 of a 5-year study, documenting their graduating class. 10th graders Aiden Lamb, Maya Laporte, Naomi Pabon, Sarah Savagnon, and Alyssa Victoria will today be illuminating the struggles and triumphs faced by their peers from a year of protest, pandemic, and online learning. I will let them introduce the project and get started as soon as I share my screen.
Basically, the CUNY S2 Intergenerational Learning Collective uplifts the voices of recent graduates from a middle school in the heart of Washington Heights. In partnership with the City University of New York, this is a student-led and designed project where we, the first graduating class of School in the Square, are tracing the experiences of our fellow graduates through the collection of interviews over a 5-year period. This project began in 2019 before pandemic and protests swept the city and the nation as a whole. However, in the past year, we have sharpened our focus from merely studying the adjustments to high school for those mostly Latinx youths who have graduated with us to concentrating on the lives and commitments of our classmates struggling through unprecedented times. We have documented, and today you will learn about the effects of mandatory digital learning for a generation of young people who mostly from Washington Heights and surrounding neighborhoods, who were in the process of forming their adult identities before their social lives evaporated. We will discuss the impact of a newfound consciousness in regards to racial justice as our classmates look to the streets and social media in defense of marginalized communities. You will hear from these testimonies yearnings for a more just society for which our generation is ready to advocate. Finally, you will learn what it means for us to be the authors of our own story.
Sierra and I will be talking about living and learning in times of COVID. Hi, I'm Alyssa. And our research has shown how learning took a radical shift when schools went online. In the spring, many of those interviewed found themselves in asynchronous classes, just given assignments to work on. Learning remotely was new for everyone. Those interviewed talked about needing guidance and assistance, and with online classes, they didn't really get that because they were not really interacting with the teacher. Despite the initial euphoria, these freshmen explained the realization of an extended online learning experience, washing over them in waves. A 10th grader from Washington Heights explained, the idea of not going to school kind of sounds good, but when you do it for like months and you're online, it kind of really takes a hit on you. I know from my personal experiences, I did a lot better in person than online because you really lose track of time and scheduling. But also, you couldn't see your friends for like months on end, he continued. It gets challenging because you don't have a set schedule. In school, they basically do it for you. You go to your classes and everything is set up. But when you're at home, online, you have to manage your time very well.
This student was not alone, shifting from excitement at what was perceived as getting out of school to the realization that their old life had ended. A 10th grader interviewed for this project stated, everybody was confused at first. I was confused, my friends were confused, my teachers were confused. Like it was just a whole mess. My grades went down. Another remarked on the difficulty of staying organized in an online format. I did a lot better in person than online because you really lose track of time and scheduling. Another from Inwood agreed. I feel personally that I'm falling behind compared to when I was in school. Motivation decreased in a large number of those interviewed for this project, many of whom were exceptional students prior to the pandemic, forced to move online during their freshman year. One student interviewed for this project remarked, I just started losing motivation.
A 9th grader from Washington Heights explained how being home is riddled with distractions. It's like when you're on your laptop, you get so tempted to play video games and stuff like that, and just not to do your work. Part of the issue was the separation between home and school life, which had evaporated for many young people in New York City. Living in apartments crowded by family members, all working from home, a 10th grader from Washington Heights, explained. It was very stressful 24/7 with my family, and like I'll be on my computer trying to do my work, and my grandma will go telling me to do a whole bunch of things. I'm like, it's just not compatible. Home and school, no bueno. Another talked about the difficulty of multiple online classes going on simultaneously in a single apartment. It was actually kind of hard because I live with my three sisters. We would all be in class at the same time, and it would be hard to be in class while they were in class in the same apartment, and you just hear the professors or the teachers telling them what to do and then concentrating on my work.
With both students and teachers new to an online format, work quickly accumulated, which added to the stress of young people already in a state of panic due to the dual crisis of racial uprisings and pandemic. One student explained of her teachers, they threw projects at you on top of projects. Each class had a project and it was basically due at the same time, so it was really hard to manage your time.
Beyond the stress of the workload and lack of productive space, the isolation of COVID was devastating for young people in early high school who were exploring who they were by interacting with their peers. One student explained, I lost contact with almost all my classmates, and I wouldn't speak to them. A 10th grader from the Heights agreed, we miss what we do in school. We miss our friends. We miss playing basketball, miss listening to music. What happened in school is always like something to remember. And the fact that we don't have that really kind of sucks. Another discussed how the isolation heightened her anxieties. It made my anxiety worse. So I would freak out and have breakdowns easier because I was locked in. I couldn't go outside or talk to my therapist.
Despite these challenges and quote unquote learning loss, much was gained in this year at home and online. A student from Washington Heights explained, I've become a lot more mentally stable. I used to be really negative and cold, like seasonal depression type of state. And then when we got like literally 6 months of quarantine, I really found myself. I found what I was comfortable with and found the right people for me and the people who would stick there or would stay by my side through a whole pandemic. I grew more comfortable in my own skin and I've gained confidence now.
Many discussed the new bonds formed with family members whom they had been forced into close proximity with. A 10th grader from Washington Heights states of his family, it was pretty weird for us because we didn't used to see each other a lot because we were working or going to school. But now it's fun because we have more time. We joke around and stuff. Another agreed that this time was a blessing for him and his family. It really helped me connect with my family. You find out more about people's lives when you spend that much time with them. I feel like I've gotten to learn more about my family, like more of who they are and what they do on a daily basis, what their facial expressions mean.
Online learning took a gigantic toll on young people. It was a huge transition, led to significant social isolation, and had devastating impacts on students' mental, emotional, and physical health. However, there were positive outcomes as well. The world slowed down. Young people learned how resilient they could be, and they forged relationships with loved ones that they likely never would have had the opportunity to forge if this pandemic never occurred.
Okay, so my name's Aiden and my partner is Maya. And our topic was titled Critical Consciousness and Youth Activism in the Midst of Racial Uprisings. A lengthy title, but basically we're talking about the racial aspect of the presentation. And yeah, so Maya can start it.
Hi, can you hear me? You can hear me? Okay, good. When we began this research project, racial justice was not explicitly part of the focus. However, since the murder of George Floyd, at protests and over social media, conversations have been sparked between youths. Memories have been relived, and young people who in elementary and middle school experienced racist interactions have begun to re-examine those moments with a new consciousness because both they and the world have matured in their understandings of racist structures. A 9th grader from Washington Heights recalls, I went to private school, so there was a lot of white kids and not many kids of color. So the white girls, they wouldn't let me hang out with them in recess because I didn't look like them. They told me, why do we even go here? One time they put gum in my hair because I had really long and pretty hair. They were just mad. And I was really the only girl of color in my class, so they just used to say, you don't look like us, so you don't belong with us. A few A few years later in middle school, she again was belittled for her color, feeling helpless because of the racial structures that silently shaped social interactions in the US. We were on the bus and we accidentally bumped this lady because the bus stopped. And then the lady was like, "You colored people better not touch me ever again." She called us the N-word. But we didn't really do much because the driver was white. So, like, let's say we would have said something. He would have called the cops. That's the type of mentality you have to have in this world. That's why we didn't really say anything because, she has more privilege than we do.
This student was far from the only preteen to experience racism at such a young age, only to relive the trauma as the murder of George Floyd made everyone reflect on past experiences. At a beauty supply store, when he was in middle school, a child of Dominican immigrants who lives in the Bronx felt a man come up behind him and say, what are you hiding in your pocket? And I said, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "I'm going to call the police." I was like, "What did I do?" I literally came in looking for a brush. I'm a customer. And he starts yelling at me. So I pulled the things out of my pocket. It was a do-rag and another brush. And in Spanish, because he was Mexican, I said, "Look at you, you look dumb." I never went to that store again. A 10th grader from Inwood, just north of Washington Heights, detailed a time he and his friends were targeted because of what they looked like. Years later, he recalls, "We were at McDonald's and that one time, and there was this lady who just came up to us and called us the N-word and immigrants, and we were in 6th grade. Speaking to his friend, the interviewer, who was also present, the now 10th grader recalled, "You guys called the police and they didn't even end up showing up. They didn't do anything. They didn't care. They never came." It wasn't just that young people were reliving their own traumas, they also began to reflect on the structures that have harmed their communities for generations. Forms of popular education began to fill in the gaps left by whitewashed history courses and public discourses. Across many interviews, we observed an evolution in thinking about the role of police in Black and Brown communities. A 10th grader from Washington Heights observed, "A lot of people started to become woke after what happened to George Floyd and all these protests. A lot of people started to realize, like, damn, it's real."
This new woke consciousness proved particularly transformative in regards to views on police. An immigrant from the DR, now in 10th grade, recalls George Floyd's murder and the resulting protests changed his point of view really, really fast because I thought the police were trying to protect us, take care of us, but I can now see that they're so violent against people of color. Another 10th grader from the Heights explained the events of the last year. It made me realize how messed up the police system is right now. When I was younger, I used to think of them like, "Oh yeah, they're the good people. They're the good people. You call them, you say you're safe, right?" I'd call them in any instance. But now you're seeing instances where the police are called and they're using their power against you. I wouldn't like that. A high academic achieving 10th grader from Washington Heights concurred. These past few months have shown me just how much they can really cross the line, and that's crazy. The events of the last year have transformed how these young people view law enforcement. When I see the police, I feel scared. I feel scared because you never know what could happen, what they could do. I also realized that there's good police. I cannot say that all police are bad.
With the problems identified, the young people interviewed for this project are not satisfied with being passive observers. They are serving as motivators and inspirers of one another. For some, activism starts at the dinner table. One student interviewed for this project observed, "I've seen some of my peers go protesting, and I've seen some of my peers try to make their families understand what is happening in racism, especially for people who have maybe racist uncles or fathers. They started to talk out against them. And I find that inspiring to talk out against your own family just for what you believe is right." Not all of these youths were allowed to leave their homes to join the protests in the streets, but they still supported their peers. A 10th grader from the Heights recalls, "The people who went to the protests themselves and actually physically were there, that really inspired me, and I wish I could have been there."
And despite the obstacles they have faced as individuals and as members of marginalized communities, many of our peers found hope in the struggles currently being waged. As the child of Mexican immigrants, a 10th grader from the Heights reveals, the protests make me happy being a person of color because it just makes me realize how a person can raise their race, their voice, their right to be heard and seen. In the midst of the disastering year that was 2020, many of these young people can still imagine a better world. I want there to be more justice. I just feel like the city just needs to open their eyes and fix it for the better. Sometimes that better world is just to be treated like everyone else. A positive outcome for this would definitely allow me to feel safer in my skin.
These interviews collectively tell a story of the pain and fear inscribed on the memories of young people of color in NYC. It unravels how 2020 for many raised the profile of police as catalysts for that pain and fear. Yet it also tells a story of perseverance as these 10th graders have not been discouraged. Instead, they fight with their families, their keyboards, and on the streets for a better world they've only begun to imagine.